I am your understudy, so thank you very much. I'm Zack Rosenberg, founder and CEO of Qortex, as you mentioned. Very quickly, very briefly, we produce signals and insights that connect video content to advertising outcomes. Most brands are using us for media quality scoring. Joined by Beth, Egan, Michael Lampert. Do you guys want to introduce yourself for 30 seconds?
I'm Beth Egan. I am an associate professor of advertising at Newhouse. I'm also a Newhouse advertising alum, so double dipping here on this. And I run the media planning curriculum. I spent 25 years in the media planning business here in New York City, and bringing a lot of data and programmatic strategies to our students, as well as AI.
Oh, that was good. That's fine. Hi, I'm Michael Lampert. I work at Mondelēz. For those of you who don't know who Mondelēz is, that's on purpose, but we make Oreo cookies. Oreo cookies and all the other fun snacks, Ritz crackers. Tate's cookies, Sour Patch Kids. So I took Mondelēz for about 5 years and recently took over helping to manage all the global generic AI. And that's dead. So
Just got to figure out
thank you. Yes.
Well, the first question that everyone's going to want to ask is, did you bring any Ritz crackers, Oreos, or anything for anyone else?
I did not.
Okay, well, up till that start, sorry.
But I did bring Oreo cookies last week to another Syracuse event in which we took a group of students over to VaynerMedia to explain to them and talk about careers in digital and AI and what it's like to enter this field. And I brought tons of stuff and nobody really ate it.
I think I still have some in my bag.
I brought Sour Patch Kids and Oreos, yeah, nobody ate them.
All right, so my first question to ground us in Syracuse University is, what was your favorite bar or restaurant?
Yeah, you're going to date me on that one.
That's okay.
Big fan of Maggie's, which is now a bagel store.
Well, I didn't go to Syracuse. I went to GW, but Beth, what's the name of the place you took me? Dinner, that was nice. It's not a bar, it was more of a
Yeah, that's a new one, Ellen Social, brand new. Check it out next time you're in town.
I also didn't go, but I frequented Syracuse, and Dinosaur Barbecue was obviously the place to go, so I'll throw that one out there. All right, so let's get started with what I think is the most exciting topic of the entire day. Sorry, audience. Yeah. All the other speakers, but generative AI. So what is generative AI? What isn't it? How are you thinking about it within your organizations?
Well, I mean, for us, it's probably the most complex. So for us at Mondelēz, I think generative AI is probably one of the biggest bets that the company has made in the last 20 years, just from an investment point of view, from a priority point of view. I think what you'll see if you look in the news and the press is a lot of companies putting out Gen AI campaigns. And we do that. We've put out about 100 in the past 2 years. But we made a fundamental decision that we believed that this was part of a broader global marketing transformation. So instead of focusing on campaigns, we have decided to build an incredibly complicated, overwhelming, extremely expensive global in-house ecosystem to manage all things generative AI, from creative to data to production, with a simple but incredibly complicated goal of generating more efficient, more effective assets that we can put into the marketplace. So we have a very rigid process of what we can and can't do. All technology has to be built inside the Mondelēz environment. We don't allow our creative assets outside of that environment, so we would never be able to share, even with our JVP partners, the assets that are trading an external model. Everything has to be done in-house, and it's an entire end-to-end ecosystem across, 80 countries and 400 brands.
Okay.
This is one of my favorite questions because I think generative. Yeah, exactly. Just make sure I don't take up the rest of the time on my soapbox. I think generative AI is one of the most misunderstood advancements in technology in this century, our lifetimes. And I say that because many people, and I don't think many of them are in this room, but many people believe that Sam Altman and OpenAI created AI in November of 2022, which is patently false. And so when we get into these conversations, I think it's really important to understand that AI as a term has been around since 1950. AI as a practical application has been around since the birth of digital media. And what we're facing in the world today with the introduction of generative AI in November of 2022 is a topic that is really going to change the way our world works and how we move within the world. And I think when we have these conversations, we need to be a little bit more specific about what we're talking about.
Well, we will get specific in this conversation, but let's start with personal workflows. And obviously there's a lot of tools out there. We don't have to necessarily dive into each and every one, but I often find myself struggling with how to remember to use it or how to get it into my everyday process. I put a little post-it note on my computer that says generative AI with a question mark, and that's kind of my reminder to be like, oh right, that exists. How do you think about it in your own lives?
Well, in my personal life, I try not to think about it because it's so overwhelming at work. But at work, what we've decided to do is minimize the overwhelming of people by saying, this is the current process for a campaign, for example. Here is where generative AI is going to fit and not fit, so that we don't get into the issue of it's going to bog down everything, and it's going to cost more and become more expensive. So what we've said is, from brief to execution, here's where it fits in. And mostly where we believe it fits in is, Mondelēz is always rooted in business problem, use case. So we had to figure out what were the most common use cases for the most brands globally, so that we got the most out of the tremendous investment that we're putting into this. And right now it's become, for 3 brands that are kicking off in Q1, e-commerce, which allows us to swap in, more concepts as faster than we would ever be able to before. Concept generation and concept versioning. So we believe that that's the infrastructure that we're building, and now we'll put into the process for everyone that does those 3 things. Commerce is probably 15-20% of the business, so it's relevant globally. Concept generation is obviously every brand in every market, and concept validation allows us to pre-test creative against what we would call a synthetic audience, saving a ton of money on focus groups and pre-testing and post-testing. So the whole concept is just to do everything better, faster, cheaper, and more effectively with an extremely complicated ecosystem.
And have you found your colleagues to be embracing it and using it the way that you envisioned, or is there still some hesitancy around certain tools, certain aspects, what it can do?
Well, I think as people, they want to do it, because they know it's cool and it's the latest thing, but as brand leaders, they're kind of like, why do I care? I have so many things. If you're the brand team for US Oreo, everybody wants you to do everything. Because they're the biggest brand, it's a $4 billion brand. But what we try to do is explain to them what is the business case for them. So it's almost like a direct response campaign, which I used to do back in the day, which is, we work with Accenture, for example, to help us put together a 7-year business case for how this is going to benefit the brand. So right now it benefits the brand in efficiency and effectiveness with the technology that's available today. But right now, for our standards, 70% of our advertising is video, premium video. The current technology, regardless of what you hear, doesn't really produce video, television quality video, the way we need it. So we've had to forecast out, when will that technology be available? And when can the brands use it? And what will their payback be? Because the brands are investing millions of dollars in this. They have to know what the payback is, and the finance teams are mandating a business case payback. So we've been fortunate to show them a reasonably positive business case that we believe in, but it doesn't pay out immediately. It takes years to pay out. And that's a hard sell internally, but if you get them to believe that the future of marketing is generative AI, then they begrudgingly come along. And a little bit of a corporate mandate at the end helps, but just a little bit, but it's not for everyone. It's really just for big powerhouse brands that have the capability and have the data and have the creative to make a difference.
And that stems 7 other questions, but Beth, how are you thinking about it?
So in my work, I use AI every single day. Don't tell my students, but I use it to write the tests. I love it for student feedback because I can just go vent like, this is crap, and then say, please write this in a supportive and constructive manner. I think what we really struggle with at SU and at Newhouse in particular, because we're content creators at Newhouse, is how do we teach students to use it in a way that it's amplifying what they're trying to say, not creating what they're trying to say, not teaching them just hands-on keyboard. I think prompt crafting as a skill is a scam. Anyone who knows how to talk to a person can talk to AI and get what they need out of it. What students really need to understand is, how is it their buddy? How is it their coworker? And that's what we're really trying to figure out right now.
So just talk plainly. Talk like you would to anyone else, and you'll get what you need out of it.
I mean, it's interesting. The hardest part for us is, you know, I'm a reasonably technical person, but I'm not trying to get involved in the actual tech build that, you know, we're doing with Google and our partners at the agencies. But the responsible AI component of this is really, really complicated. So, you know, what I've learned over the past 6 months since I started doing this is that everything you think is easy becomes an incredibly complex governance legal problem immediately.
Yeah.
So prompting is like, sure, that's wonderful. Let's make an ad that has, you know, a man with white hair and glasses eating an Oreo in front of the Eiffel Tower. Oops, do you have rights access to the Eiffel Tower? You know, people say, you know, let's put a platter of Oreos out on a Thanksgiving table. Well, Mondelēz has a very specific rule about consumption. We don't like to show people shoving their faces with Oreos. So everything that the prompt generates has to go through an incredibly complex, governed, rules-based analysis that flags creative for, you know, just not just the basic racist, sexist, pornography, gambling that we always, but nuanced things that we are now saying we will not let the technology have an output that shows certain things. And we've gotten burned, you know, by, well, we should use this or we don't have rights. The rights are expiring. How do you train a model on an asset that is expiring? It's these little things that no one would ever think of until you realize that the prompt is the easiest part of it. It's the output of the prompt that causes a ton of problems.
And those guardrails, so for all the brands who are in the room, how are you talking to legal about that? How are you getting that through the process? What's that experience been like in your organization?
It's incredibly complicated and painful.
Sure. I saw it in your face as you
It's just painful because like I said, everything you do, you think you're making forward progress, but then something pulls you back that you have to take, you know, 2 steps forward. So it's a very delicate balance because you're asking someone to take liability for an unproven, unknown, constantly emerging technology, and nobody wants to do it. Eventually, somebody has to step up and do it, and then we figure out how to minimize their risk by putting in governance rules around what you can and can't do. So, I mean, think about it just from a tactical point of view. Oreo had a Super Bowl ad. We can't use that to train the model because the rights have already expired. And even if you could, you can't train the model on Lady Gaga because we don't have rights to use her assets. So it's really putting responsible AI and the process of it at the same seat at the table as creative or media or investment. Because without the governance process and responsible AI, we have our own not just following laws, but Mondelēz's very conservative way of using technology makes it extremely hard. So we don't get to do as cool a stuff as we want to right now, but hopefully eventually we'll get.
But it sounds like you're putting the building blocks in place where once you solve some of these problems, the next iterations become easier and easier to tackle, right?
I mean, easier, but there seems to just be every day a different type of problem that we run into around legal or governance or responsible AI, because without the responsibility part, the whole thing goes bad. So actually my boss told me last night that there was, if you search for an ad from L'Oreal actually, was it L'Oreal? I think it was L'Oreal. Some AI company generated a video spot without any usage rights. And what they put out, they could never use. Because they had like Beyonce's music, and Rihanna was in it, and I was just like, right, we can never do that. So it's just really, really hard.
I couldn't do it either.
Nobody can do it. It's on the creative agencies, it's on the business affairs people. It's the most unsexy part of it.
Yeah.
But the best prompt with an output you can't use is worthless.
Right. Well, let's stay on this theme. So one thing that I saw about Mondelēz is this idea of the generative CMO, and how you talked already about how it's instilled in kind of every process. But one thing that really struck me that I saw was, I think a lot of people think of AI as kind of removing humanity to some extent, but your objective is to inject humanity, to create kind of a better relationship between you and the consumers. And I'm really curious, how you're thinking about that and executing it.
Well, I mean, that's another way that people sort of, decide not to do it, because they just have a going-in assumption that, if you let the machine generate concepts, it's going to blow out the creative agency. It's just not true. We see it as a tool that the creative agencies use, just like when media agencies used to log into DSPs and do some of that work themselves. It didn't blow out everyone at the agency that I used to manage. So what we're trying to do is say that this is an incredibly complex, valuable tool that allows things to be done more efficiently and more effectively, so that we all can focus on other things. So it's not about whether a copywriter is going to lose their job because we have a prompt that can write a script. There's still a tremendous amount of work that has to get loaded into these systems that allows the output to happen. That's still, Mondelēz has a very hard and fast rule that every output still has to be reviewed by a human. It can never just be created and sent out there. So we see this entire technology as additive to the creative process, not away from it.
And there was a particular campaign you did around Sour Patch Kids, and I think that was in conjunction with you, Beth, and your team at Syracuse. Maybe you could talk about that collaboration and what that meant.
We did a project in one of my classes last spring, and as all great things come to be, it started with another project falling to pieces in my eyes. But Michael and I were working together. The students were going to be working on Sour Patch Kids for their project that semester. And another partner with me in that class, a gentleman by the name of Rex Briggs, some of you might know Rex, from Claritas. He and his son were writing a book called The AI Conundrum. I highly recommend the book. I've been teaching from it for a few years. But his son Caleb had created this digital twins technology. So we wanted to test out the concept of, can you use a synthetic person, a digital twin, as a proxy for a real person? So what we did was we had the students work with the researcher. They did these one-on-one interviews, and so we had the transcripts of the interviews. Then they engaged with a tool called Twinsy.ai that Caleb Briggs created. I love the tool because it starts with 2 truths and a lie. And then you continue to interact with the tool with the end goal of creating your digital twin. So we had the digital twin, we had the transcripts from the in-person interviews, and we compared the output regarding attitudes towards Sour Patch Kids. Where we are right now with that research is the initial output was so-so. It got any of the elements that are human elements, like around taste, not so right. Anything that was more objective, like impact of cost, was a little bit better. But what we did with the next step was actually ingest some of Mondelēz's existing research on Gen Z and relationships with Sour Patch Kids, and combine that, and we're starting to see much closer proxies for that. So, I mean, I think the jury's still out, but I'm really intrigued by this opportunity to use generative AI as sort of a way to give you agency over your digital twin, and maybe be able to use that in different ways.
Well, I'm sorry to say that this panel has come to an end. I feel like we just got to the beginning of the good stuff here, but I learned a lot, and I thank you both. Beth, Michael, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.